Hello and welcome to Camp Xbox. Turok is one of those games that, even if I hear the name, doesn't evoke visions of its comics or 360 game. It's the Nintendo 64, shooting out dinosaurs in violent glory with early polygon graphics. Yet after 4 games on that console, what was next? And that was Turok Evolution. I played it recently, and let me give you some history, lasting impact, and my thoughts on the game. All footage was captured off of an original Xbox, and I want to thank my YouTube channel members for their support, but let's go ahead and hop into this one. Many people might not know, but Turok does not date back to the 90s with either the Nintendo 64 or Valiant Comics. It actually dates back to 1954, premiering in the 4-color comics anthology series and eventually getting its own comic in 1956 titled Turok Son of Stone. It's in this story we get the story of a Native American named Turok who must survive in a valley of dinosaurs. This was ran by Gold Key Comics till the 1980s, and then it would go dormant for a little bit. In the early 1990s, indie comic publisher Valiant Comics started releasing comics based on old Gold Key characters. Turok would make his debut with them in 1993, setting up Turok to be a full-on dinosaur hunter set in an era where dinosaurs and aliens exist together and time doesn't move. This ran for a little, and then the game publisher Acclaim came in and bought the comic company and made Acclaim Comics. Acclaim would take this property and make 4 Turok games on the Nintendo 64, all to varying levels of success. The video game made Turok a recognizable brand, and what I feel most people know him for. These games were staples on the consoles, but as the 5th generation ended and the 6th generation consoles were on the horizon, what was next for the franchise? Acclaim had been ready to leave the Nintendo 64 and move on to new modern consoles. In 2000, they said that Turok would appear on all next-generation systems. By 2001, they had announced Turok 4 at E3, touting that, in terms of gameplay, visuals, storyline, and character development, Turok Evolution represents a dedication on behalf of the entire development team that we are certain Turok fans and gamers everywhere will love. The hype was there because of its established base, and outlets like IGN were doing weekly updates for months anticipating this one's release, even though they weren't always happy, stating at one point that this game felt sickly. Aside from that though, this game pushed on to its release on September 1st, 2002 for the PS2, GameCube, GBA, and Xbox in North America, and later in the month it would see its European and Australian releases, along with a PC port a year later. I've played the Turok games over time. I remember renting the sequel and being obsessed with it for a whole weekend. During that era, I loved these games, and I've since revisited them, and I still enjoy them, especially the Night Dive remakes. This entry I played maybe 5 years ago or so because I was interested. I played a little, then I just stopped. I wasn't feeling it, but recently I was in the mood, so I thought I'd play through it. So let me break down how I felt about it, starting with the plot. In Turok, you play Talset, a Native American in the 1800s facing off against Captain Bruckner. After falling off a cliff, they are sucked into a wormhole and transported to the Lost Land, an area that has humans, dinosaurs, and ravenous slag. The slag are destroying the land and kidnapping humans, and Talset is said to be the ancient Turok, a savior to the people. Talset denies this, but still continues through the story, killing off the slag and saving the Lost Land. It's a pretty basic plot overall and has been done plenty of times before. A warrior out of time who is the fabled hero to a group. It's nothing fancy, but it does have some cutscenes scattered throughout. I found the plot not that easy to follow. It was never a strong enough presence in the game. You get some lines of dialogue between loading screens telling you why you might be doing something, either telling you why you're saving people or that you need to kill someone. It's not riveting or interesting, and it makes for a poor story overall. The setup is good. I like the classic Turok story about a Native American transported to a world of dinosaurs. Alien bad guys are cool too, but I wanted something fresh and different. And you aren't going to get that here. The plot does not seem to be the main focus of this game, and if it is, it doesn't do a good job of telling it well. I wish it had done more, and having that story would have made the back half of this game more interesting. But we will get into that with the gameplay. At first, Turok came off as a fun first-person shooter. The game is most often exploratory, having you take your weapons and traverse levels, killing off slag along the way. You use your various weapons such as bows, shotguns, and rocket launchers, and you'll be disappointed if you go into this expecting something that controls like Halo. It feels more akin to PC shooters at the time, and the gun controls can feel a little stiff. But you do get a nice auto-aim option in the menus. And if you watch this channel often, you know I have a soft spot for shooters, and this one's no exception. I've always liked how PC shooters feel, and despite being a little stiff, the controls work well enough. Movement is solid, and aiming and shooting all works well. I found the early level design to work, with the gunplay making for a very entertaining experience. Much of the early game sees you traversing maze-like jungles and exploring every nook and cranny, and traveling on giant hills to escape from the map. You must jump from hill to hill, all while dodging bullets behind every tree that you could find. It works well too, and the AI, though not very intelligent, they do their job. I just enjoyed the exploration here. I loved hanging above canyons and being high above the water. Something about this level design makes a shooter just a little more elevated. Though as a whole, I wish there were more dinosaurs in this game. The slag are fine lizard-like enemies, but to me the coolest part of Turok's identity is the dinosaurs. They do appear, but hardly at all. These moments should be showpieces. Looking at the cover, you would expect to see some dinosaurs. However, this game becomes devoid of them late into the game. Unfortunately, Turok as a whole loses much of what makes it fun in the later half of the game, resulting in a significant loss of entertainment from the beginning. If you only played a few hours of this game, you might come away saying that this was enjoyable, but playing it in its entirety is when the issues start to emerge. Many levels are just pure onslaughts with no exploration. There are many slag bases that feel like a straight line of boxy rooms, or slag airships that are just the same thing. Instead of providing interesting level design, it feels like the game just throws tons of enemies at you. This not only gives the game a severe spike in difficulty, but also makes it feel bland. You move up a little, kill some enemies, and repeat in uninspiring rooms. They throw so many enemies at you that it's difficult to keep up, and with a non-existent checkpoint system, you have to restart from the top of the last loading screen. It's more frustrating than challenging because it feels like dealing with spawning enemies rather than something organic that fits into the levels. At this moment, it stops being entertaining and turns off my continued interest of the game. Luckily, the game does try its hand at variety with pterodactyl flying sections. Here, you ride on the back of a dinosaur with guns, you aim and shoot at enemies, and you fly through these guided sections, but sometimes it'll open up with a boss fight. I saw many people online did not enjoy this at all, but I had fun with it. It was a bit of freshness that this game needed. It's difficult, but not in the same ways as the poorly designed onslaughts. Here, weaving with canyons and shooting feels right and skill-based. And other than a few tight corridors, I found this to be simplistic and work well. There's a section with a falling city that particularly worked for me, and this broke up the game well enough. There's also a 4-player multiplayer mode with this game, and though I didn't get a chance to play with anyone, just rolling through the maps, it looks like fun. The maps looked like classic shooter stuff, with bases you can run all around. I'd love to see some bots in a game like this, but that doesn't happen here. I'd say it's a solid shooter to pick up if you want to play with some friends. Unfortunately though, in the single player, even with some variety, I can't say that most of this game was fun. A really strong start eventually whimpers out for a game that feels stretched out to maximize time, rather than making a game that's thoroughly interesting with its level design. Instead, it opts to just have you shoot a ton of strong enemies, something that makes you wish you were playing the beginning of the game when you're beating it. It's not bad, it plays fine, but it's just really a mixed experience as far as gameplay goes. Graphically, Turok Evolution is not a standout on the Xbox. However, the skyboxes and lighting do look good here. Many of these levels have a nice large sense of scale. When you look up and see the bright sky or darkness above you, it does look good, especially when mixed with some great lighting. Each level has a different sense of light levels, making them all feel unique. Light rays do shine down, and it's a clear game running at 480p on the Xbox. It all looks crisp and sharp as far as fidelity goes, but the actual look of the game is very messy. Jungles are a lot of greens and browns, and it looks muddy, which is understandable because of the location, but many of the assets blend together and it just doesn't feel high quality. Many textures are blurry, and there are a few levels where it mixes together in such an ugly way that it's hard to navigate. Not only that, but even the slag ships are blandly designed, and even early levels that I like so much, the land formations are nothing special. I hate to say it, but it's just kind of an ugly looking game. One more saving grace for it though is the copious amounts of violence. Headshots and everything else will make blood pump everywhere, and some of these animations are gruesome. They're awesome for anyone who loves good gore effects in games. I think the slag design overall isn't bad either. They do make good enemies, especially when violence comes in as a factor. So I'd say most things look fine in this game, but the environments are rough and ugly, feeling a generation behind.
Talk is detailed to the feeding grounds at once.
The music in Turok Evolution is easily one of its greatest strengths. Seriously, there was no complaints here. This score by Nelson Everhart captures the spirit the game is aiming for. Some of my favorite moments occur when you're traversing jungles and an ambient drum starts beating in the background. The sound of the game has a tribal feeling that fits perfectly with the mood. Though it isn't all ambient, sometimes it kicks into a nice rock groove. It's perfectly in sync with the game and works well with the other sounds. The gunfire is solid and mixes perfectly for the game. The sound of arrows shooting and footsteps blend well, and there's a nice focus on sound in this game. I particularly love hearing the roars of dinosaurs, and when the T-Rex shows up, it has a powerful sound. However, I'd say the voice acting here is pretty weak.
You have no choice. I have searched for hundreds of years to find you. You are the son of stone. Accept the burden and release me.
There's not a lot of standout performances, and some of the voice mixing is extremely low. Characters sound a bit too quiet, but other than that, I think the audio is fairly well done here. Turok Evolution is a game I'm very mixed on. On one hand, the controls are good, and I like the game type variety with the flying levels. But the level design is rough in the end, and the lack of checkpoints that go with the brutal battles thrown at you is frustrating. Throw on that the game is visually muddy, and I think it has more elements that I dislike than like. I think a good game is here, and it's one that I would understand if someone enjoyed it, but it really left a bad impression on me, especially with half of the game. And I can't say I'd ever go back to this one. I wish Turok got something better in this generation. On my ranking list, Turok enters in at number 94 out of the 104 games I've covered on the channel. I think the variety I got from Turok was something I appreciated over Narnia, but Harry Potter is much more charming in design. Turok Evolution came out to mixed reviews according to Metacritic with a score of 68. IGN gave it a 7.1, calling it a mix of entertainment and frustrating tedium. GameSpot gave it a 7.3, saying it was flawed with bad AI, but fans of the series should have fun. For official Xbox Magazine, writer Dave Rees said that it lacked visual punch and the story was awkward. It seemed that almost across the board, 6 and 7s were the average score, even though Maxim Online gave it a 10. Shortly after this release, a sequel started work, but it never was picked up. Acclaim would never get the chance to start another Turok entry because only a few short years later, Acclaim would lose rights to Turok and MLB due to not paying royalties. A rough sign of things to come because shortly after that they would close all of their studios and go bankrupt, leaving behind a fascinating legacy. Eventually Disney would pick up this IP and release their own game, which we will eventually cover. But more recently, Night Dive has gone through and given some awesome remasters to the original Nintendo 64 games, and maybe one day we'll get this one too. I think they could do a good job of improving it. I see a lot of mixed reception for this game online. In my research of this game, I found plenty of Reddit threads proclaiming this to be a fantastic game, and some in the comments were agreeing, and some hated it. This is also reflected on Backlogged, where it holds a 2.7 out of 5. In the reviews, you will find those who find this game buggy and weak, but others who love it and had a great time with it when they were younger. So this game will always have a mixed legacy, but I do think Turok as a whole will be fondly remembered. But that does wrap it up for today. If you enjoyed this review, leave a like, it really helps me out in the algorithm. Subscribe to keep up with the retro Xbox content, and check out my second channel, Camp Extras, for more retro content. Comment below with any memories you have with Turok in general. And I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube channel members. Thank you so much for your support. You really help out the channel. And I'll see you here next time at Camp Xbox.